So, we've managed to get our hands on a pretty incredible and honestly a pretty chilling declassified Imperial study. It covers an event so out of left field that it forced the highest levels of the Imperium to completely rethink what a threat even is. We're not talking about a new Xenos fleet or a demon army. We're talking about a single person who almost unraveled the entire galaxy just by being a hero.
And that really gets to the heart of the paradox. The one question the Inquisition had to wrap its head around. What on earth do you do when the single greatest force for good your galaxy has ever seen is also, somehow, the biggest existential threat to your entire civilization's survival?
All right, let's dive into Part 1, an unknowable anomaly. To really get why the Imperium did what it did, you first have to understand the problem they were facing. See, this entity's arrival, it wasn't an invasion. It was a deep, reality-warping mystery that basically broke every single system the Imperium had for classifying its enemies.
For 10,000 years, the Imperium has had a playbook for every monster imaginable. Xenos, purge 'em. Daemon, banish it. Heretic, you burn 'em. Simple. But this guy, he didn't fit into any of those boxes. He was something totally, completely new. And you know what? That made him scarier than any enemy they had ever known.
Think about this. His arrival was completely silent. No warp storms, no freaky whispers from the Immaterium, not so much as a flicker from the Astronomicon. He just showed up. I mean, look at these threat indicators. Every single tripwire the Imperium uses to detect something bad coming went off. Well, they didn't go off. They stayed dead silent. That's how they knew this was something outside their entire understanding of reality.
The Adeptus Mechanicus, they were absolutely horrified. Their entire religion is built on one simple truth. All machines decay. They all need faith and prayer and rituals to work. And then this guy comes along, a biological machine with impossible power that never got tired, never broke down, and needed zero prayer. He was a living, breathing insult to their machine god. The Imperium literally had to invent a new classification just for him, ontological anomaly. And that changed everything. Suddenly, they weren't fighting a person anymore. They were fighting a walking, talking paradox whose very existence was an attack on the fundamental laws of their grim, decaying universe. Okay, Part 2, a contagion of hope. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because the real threat wasn't his ability to punch through mountains. No, it was something way more subtle and a whole lot more dangerous. It was the idea he represented.
The official report calls it ontological friction. Here's an easy way to think about it. The 40K galaxy runs on a very specific kind of fuel, right? Hate, violence, fear, decay, the nasty stuff. This entity's presence was like pouring water into that gas tank. It just didn't react. His very nature started to passively shut down the dark forces that keep the galaxy in its horrible, bloody balance.
So when he ran into orcs, he didn't get into the big bloody brawl that fuels their psychic war field. Nah, he just took their war machines apart, and the orcs' power just fizzled out. It was like a sad balloon deflating. Then against chaos, he didn't use faith as a weapon. He used clarity and conviction, starving demons of the fear and rage they need to survive. He wasn't playing their game. He was making their game impossible to play. And this was the ultimate heresy. The entire Imperium is built on one single horrifying truth. Billions must die to buy humanity just one more day. Sacrifice isn't a tragedy for them. It's the core mechanic of survival. This entity proved that victory was possible without that endless meat grinder. That idea, all by itself, was enough to threaten the Imperium's very foundations.
And that's when the Inquisition finally named the true enemy. It wasn't the man in the red cape. It was hope. Hope itself. And it spread like a virus. Soldiers started questioning why they had to make suicide charges. Planetary governors started questioning why they had to be so brutal. If one person could save everyone without a cost, why was all their suffering even necessary? Hope became a direct, ideological attack on the very mechanism of imperial control.
So, Part 3, the Imperial response. Faced with an enemy they couldn't shoot, couldn't corrupt, and couldn't even begin to understand, what did the Imperium do? Well, it did what it does best. It got strategic, with cold, brutal, calculating logic.
This quote right here is the key to their entire plan. It's a foundational doctrine for when they run up against something they just can't destroy with armies and warships. They couldn't kill this guy, so they had to find another way to take him off the board. Their plan was, well, pretty meticulous. First, they redefined the problem. This wasn't a military threat, it was a conceptual one. Then, they tried something called narrative co-option. When that, predictably, blew up in their face, they had to move to their final, desperate gambit: nullification via revelation.
Phase 1 was actually pretty smart. They tried to absorb him into their own mythology. They started spreading stories about an angel of the emperor, trying to steal his image for their own propaganda. But it failed spectacularly, because the entity refused to be worshipped. He refused to take orders. He couldn't be controlled. And in the Imperium, anything that can't be controlled has to be removed.
Which brings us to the climax of this whole incursion. Part 4, Revelation on the Throne. With every other option off the table, the Inquisition played its final card. It was a philosophical checkmate, and it was delivered on Holy Terra itself.
They didn't even try to kill him. They knew that was pointless. Instead, they invited him to the Imperial Palace. They brought him before the most sacred and the most terrible object in the entire galaxy, the Golden Throne. This wasn't going to be a battle of fists. This was a battle for the soul.
And right there they showed him the truth, the ugly, awful truth. The Emperor of Mankind isn't some glorious, shining god. He's a 10,000-year-old psychic corpse, kept in a state of living death by the daily, agonizing sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. His dying mind is the only thing holding back the endless hordes of chaos from swallowing reality whole. He is a monstrous engine of suffering that keeps humanity alive.
And that was the trap, the unsolvable problem they laid at his feet. How do you save humanity now? If you destroy the Golden Throne to end all that suffering, you condemn the entire human race to demonic possession. But if you let it continue, you're endorsing a system of perpetual, unimaginable torture. There was no right answer. To save them, he would have to become a monster himself.
And now, the final section, a universe without hope. The aftermath of this confrontation wasn't really a victory for anyone. It was more of a resolution, a final grim acceptance of how the galaxy really works.
The entity wasn't beaten. He wasn't defeated. He just left. The study concludes that he was, and I quote, rejected by a universe that could not survive hope. He finally understood that his principles, his very being, were incompatible with the brutal, horrible math of survival in the 41st millennium. He couldn't fix this reality without breaking his own code, so he just removed himself from the equation. The Imperium's cleanup was swift, efficient, and absolute. All records were purged, every bit of data about him, his name, his symbol, erased from history. The event was officially relabeled ontological contamination, as if it were a foreign idea that had briefly infected reality. And the most chilling part? The very concept of hope was officially classified as an ideological hazard, a direct threat to the survival of mankind.
And this brings us to the last haunting line from those sealed archives. In the end, the entity served one final, terrible purpose. He was a living reminder of what this galaxy can never, ever be. He proved, once and for all, that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.